The tournament is only hours away. Do you have enough betting knowledge in your bag to cash tickets on Sunday? Join our golf betting experts as they expose value for bettors by analyzing the course, the field, and the matchups. Improve your handicapping with long shots. Ladies and gentlemen, now on the tee, Brady Cannon, Matt Humans, and Wes Reynolds.
Welcome to Long Shots. Brady Cannon, Matt Humans, and Wes Reynolds for the British Open version of Long Shots, the final major of the year. And before we get to that, we want to review what happened last week. We had two tournaments, big events. Dylan Fratelli, the South African and former University of Texas star, gets his first PGA Tour victory at the John Deere Classic and earns his way into the field at Royal Portrush. He will be there to start here in just a few hours. And then the Scottish Open, Bernd Wiesberger went into Sunday at 20 under par and had to hang on and win in a playoff. He was already qualified for the event, but Wes, we had a couple of birdie fests. We didn't necessarily expect it out of the Scottish Open, but really a couple of birdie fests in golf last week.
No, certainly not. And Fratelli, of course, won the decisive match in the 2012 NCAA Championship down at Texas. 2 wins on the European Tour, but had never quite won on the PGA Tour. But he gets his first win, gets the 2-year exemption, and the last spot into Portrush. And then in the Scottish Open, really a battle of attrition in the playoff between Bernd Wiesberger and Benjamin Hebert. But I had a couple guys close. Henrik Stenson tied for 4th. But, yeah, the cut at the Scottish Open was actually lower than the cut at the John Deere Classic, which says a lot. That course played really easy. I was on a radio appearance earlier talking about Matt Kuchar's prospects for the week. He shot 16 under par, and he finished tied for 20th. So that shows you that the course, the Renaissance Club, played pretty easy for the Scottish Open.
Now, Matt, you were on vacation. I don't know if you had any time to watch either of these events, but Bernd Wiesberger struggling in that playoff. You know, I've seen some sharp people, including our friend Jeff Sherman, that like Wiesberger to possibly fare well in the Open Championship, but I wonder if that struggle on Sunday, kind of thwarts his chances.
Yeah, I don't like to bet on guys to win back-to-back weeks anyway.
Yeah.
And I did watch some of the Scottish Open, and I watched quite a bit of the Irish Open too. Just because I think those events help you handicap the British a little bit. But, yeah, Brady, I would not bet on last week's winners this week in the British. And as far as Dylan Fratelli is concerned, he's got to be thrilled just to get his first PGA Tour win and be in the British field. I was talking with Jeff Sherman of the Westgate Superbook about this earlier today on our afternoon show. I think there are 90 to 100 players who legitimately have a shot to win the British Open at Royal Portrush. And Jeff said, oh, no doubt about it, maybe more.
Yeah.
And this is, Brady, the most wide open major and the most difficult or challenging one, let's put it that way, the most challenging one, I think, to handicap.
Yeah, I'll buy that and I think the weather has to do a lot with that because, and especially seaside like we are this week at Royal Portrush in Northern Ireland, the weather can change at a moment's notice. Right now, the forecast is calling for a pretty windy day tomorrow in the neighborhood of 15 miles an hour, calming down on Friday and Saturday, and then picking back up again into the neighborhood of 18 miles an hour on Sunday. That's going to be volatile and great to watch. And then in between, when it does calm down, we're supposed to get some rain. So there's going to be a little bit of everything, Wes. And Matt talks about it being a difficult handicap. What do you do with the weather factor?
Yeah, it is tough to handicap. But I mean, when I was looking ahead at the forecast, it seems like the rain might be a little lighter in the afternoon, judging by what I was looking at, and then lighter on Friday morning. So there is the potential for at least a small draw bias with the guys teeing off Thursday afternoon, the PM flight, and then thereby going right back out there on Friday morning.
I would agree with you. I think there's a very slight advantage for the late, early start, starting late on Thursday and early on Friday. But again, it is supposed to rain and blow pretty much start to finish on Thursday. Matt, did you happen to look at that and maybe play a matchup or two if you saw a discrepancy, late, early draw versus early, late?
There's one first-round matchup I was thinking of playing. I'm going to do some more research on this later here today because we were talking about the same thing with Jeff Sherman about those weather conditions and which players that might favor. I think Phil Mickelson's going to be a fade. And, Shane Lowry is matched up with him in the first round here at the South Point. at a decent price, and that might be something you look at is to bet against Phil Mickelson in the first round. He dropped 15 pounds, Brady. He really doesn't look like the same guy. I think he's trying to convince himself that this is the new me. I'm going to play better. I got a shot this week. Sometimes that backfires, and Phil's not in very good form. As far as first round matchups, so far that's the only one I've looked at. I typically prefer to play the tournament matchups, the full tournament matchups, because I feel like the better player over 4 days,
Right.
Should prevail. And sometimes in one day, it's a little more of a crapshoot.
You've got another matchup there, Phil Mickelson against Brandon Grace. Grace, an underdog there at plus 105. He hasn't exactly been in great form either, but just along the Phil Mickelson fade train, would you go against him there with Brandon Grace as well, Wes?
Yeah, I think you very well could. Grace has links experience, former winner of the Dunhill Links Championship in Scotland, so he's certainly not a greenhorn in terms of this type of golf. And then I noticed even some other guys down the board, Alexander Noren, who has matched up with Phil Mickelson. I think he's about a minus 115. But basically, I think you could see if you're kind of looking at the market and doing some comparisons between some of the books, Mickelson looks like a guy getting faded this week, and actually the defending champion, Francesco Molinari, who hasn't really been in great form over the last couple months, is getting faded in the matchups. But he's matched up against, I think, a lot better competition with Tommy Fleetwood and Henrik Stenson, certainly some guys that some very knowledgeable and sharp bettors have made cases for this week on the futures market.
Let me ask you guys about this one. I've been watching this matchup all week long. It piqued my interest at the beginning of the week when I saw the matches come out, and that was Ian Poulter against Gary Woodland. Both obviously very good players. Poulter having a great year. Woodland wins his first major championship and now steps up on the tee box at Royal Portrush in his first major since he won that U.S. Open. There could be a little bit of a fade thought there. Poulter trying to win his first major championship ever, and he started out as the favorite in this matchup at minus 115, and now I've seen it flip to Gary Woodland as the favorite at minus 115. I don't know which way to go on that one. I'm going to stay away, but do you guys have an opinion at all?
That surprises me actually a little bit that the move has been this drastic. But Poulter was a guy that really started out red hot during the first part of the year. Didn't win, but was knocking down top fives really on both sides of the pond. They started in Hawaii and then had a couple top fives once he got over to the Desert Swing in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, and then kind of cooled off a little bit in the spring. Didn't play poorly, but really cooled off. But there is a recency bias there. Gary Woodland, of course, the last major champion. So I guess it's not surprising that he takes money, but the fact that the favorites flipped. And if I had to play that, I would lean toward the Poulter side.
Yeah, and Poulter had a nice week at the Scottish Open last week, too. Matt, I'll ask you this one. It was during My Guys in the Desert that Vinny told us here at the South Point at 14-1, they took a $10,000 bet on Dustin Johnson to win it this week at Royal Portrush. What do you think? I don't think 14-1 is a bad number, but do you give DJ a real shot here?
Oh, of course, you have to give him a shot. He's, what is he currently, Wes, the number 2 ranked player in the world?
Yeah, absolutely.
And he's played well in British Opens in the past. I think he'll have a decent shot to be in contention here. And, really, Brady, when you talk about DJ at single-digit odds or 10-1, I really have no interest. When you get up around 14, 15-1, I'll say, okay, maybe that's when we can take a look at DJ. And he might be worth a play at those odds because you do have to consider that. You think about Tiger before the Masters, 14-1. That was a reasonable price. When Tiger dropped to single digits, none of us had any interest in him whatsoever. I saw him at 25-1 last night in the British. I still don't like Tiger in the British, but when you start talking about 25-1, you have to think about it.
It's a pretty good number.
And that 15-1's 14, 15-1's a pretty good number on DJ. And I'll mention you talked about Ian Poulter. Wes was really high on him early in the year, and he was playing well. And I had bet him several times and had some close calls. I decided to take a shot on him here at the British, and just a small bet, but I played him at 85-1 out here at the South Point book.
That's a nice number, and I know you guys have been on a train for Ricky Fowler for probably spans a few years at least now, betting this guy on the come line, really, that major is going to come eventually. I know you've been wavering whether you're going to do it or not this year, but Matt, you and I were talking about, and I was at Circa Sports earlier today. I added a couple of futures to my portfolio, and I noticed that Ricky Fowler at Circa Sports has jumped to 35-1. That's a pretty darn good number. Would you bite at that price?
In fact, now that you say that, I've got a Circa Sports phone app, and I'll be betting that here at the commercial break.
Yeah, that is very tempting for me.
At 20-1, I would pass, but now that you say 35-1, and Wes, you and I have talked about it. Sometimes when guys fly under the radar, that's when you want to buy, right?
Yeah, exactly. And
buy low, sell high, and 35-1 is a pretty good price.
And he's got 2 top 5 finishes here at the Open. And he's a former winner of the Scottish Open, won it at Castle Stewart a few years ago. But I mean, I think that sometimes you just take a price, I think, Brady, and we kind of talked about that a couple weeks ago on one of the Betting Across America shows when John Rahm was 25-1 and bid on him before he was about to win the Irish Open because we saw how well he was playing on Sunday. And to get in on that really quick, same with Matt Kuchar, who's now in the 30s. Maybe you can still get him at 40-1, but I got him at 50. So sometimes the numbers, I think, dictate the plays more than the player.
Well, absolutely. Probably especially more so in other sports like football, point spread and that type of thing. I know host of a numbers game, Gil Alexander, made a pre-flop play on Ricky Fowler and was able to find him in the neighborhood of 40-1. And a guest here on Long Shots, our friend Joe Pita, was live in studio with Gil earlier this week, and he was the one who tipped Gil on Ricky Fowler. And Joe, definitely a sharp guy. We'll talk with another sharp guy, Ben Coley of The Sporting Life, when we return here on Long Shots. And don't forget, Long Shots is brought to you by Westgate Las Vegas Resort and Casino, home to the world-famous Superbook and NFL Super Contest. You've heard us reference this iconic Las Vegas Resort and Casino thousands of times here on VSiN, and now we want you to experience this classic piece of Las Vegas history for yourself. Located adjacent to the Las Vegas Convention Center, 1 block off of the Strip, and across the street from amazing golf at the historic Las Vegas Country Club, Westgate Las Vegas Resort and Casino offers the finest amenities, spacious rooms, world-famous dining options, and legendary performers like nowhere else. In addition to the property's decorated history, fantastic shows, an expansive gaming floor, and of course the Superbook, Westgate Las Vegas Resort and Casino guests are given special access to the exclusive private golf club, Las Vegas Country Club, located right out the hotel's back door. Play where Dean Martin teed it up, where both the PGA and LPGA tours have held professional tournaments. The Las Vegas Country Club is like no other course in the desert, with its tree-lined fairways, glistening water features, and park-like setting. Book your stay and play today at Westgate Las Vegas. It's westgatevegas.com, westgatevegas.com, or call 702-732-5631, 702-732-5631, and make your next reservation in Las Vegas quite a super booking.
Last week, here's some of what you missed.
I want you to make a number for us.
Sure, go ahead.
He said once Saturday comes and he's running his own book, he doesn't need to bet anymore on sports because he'll have action on every game. What's the yes/no on that?
Oh, what? No, $8. $8.
But by what? By noon? Or what are you talking
I'm going
about?
to say, you need to set a time and a date. The first time he's actually going to make a bet.
Yeah.
It'll be by Sunday morning, probably, will it not?
Well, yeah, we'll always be making a few plays here.
Okay.
But I'm going to stay on Matthew Metcalf's way and the team over here. I definitely am going to watch this Tottenham game with a little more, I guess, scrutiny than I usually do. So that'll be a lot of fun.
And you'll take, 20,000, I believe you said, on that match coming up on Saturday?
Correct.
We get this every time that you're on, Mike, and now Derek today as well. What are the limits going to be overall on Saturday?
So for Major League Baseball, it'll be 5,000, 10,000 on Game 3, Blues, Bruins, and 20 on the soccer. Baseball totals, I think, will be 2,000. But remember, there's still juice on totals. The no juice only applies to sides. I think we're at 2,000 on totals and 5,000 on the game.
Here it is, everybody. Money line parlays going with some of these favorites. And I'm talking about big ones. And if you know sort of who to avoid, who the casual bettor believes ought to be a big favorite, but you kind of know from following the sport, probably should leave out, you will do very well in a sport like tennis. And I'm sorry if you don't love it as much as football or basketball. Listen, no one loves football and basketball as much as I do. But we're trying to win money. So I'm just sort of suggesting, think about sports like that. That's the message I'm trying to get across.
To me, a decent expected fielding independent is right around like 4.1, 4.10, something like that. And then what I really like to do is, if you look for the huge discrepancy, like you see the Zach Davies, it had like a 2.5 run difference between ERA and expected fielding independent. XFIP essentially takes all of the other noise out of it and gives you a more basic measure of how a pitcher is pitching. Mm-hmm. So it gives you more of what you'll expect in terms of maybe runs that he will give up. And so when I look at it, I think 4.1 to like 4.3 is my personal barometer of, okay, maybe that's a guy that you could possibly back here. But if I have a dude who's pitching at a 2.43 ERA, but you got a 4.83 xFIP, and you look and he's usually respected in the market because you have to tie all that in, that's when I usually use these guys for like sell high.
What are the chances you can put up a prop bet, yes or no, that Kevin Durant has played his last game in a Warriors uniform?
Well, I never like to put up any bets on somebody's decision, because we could sit there and analyze a game.
Okay.
You could have an opinion, I could have an opinion, but it's based on, whatever criteria we base on. I always hate to think, what's this guy thinking? I have no idea what he's thinking. I don't know. I think there's a good possibility of both.
Welcome back to Long Shots, VSiN's weekly golf betting show. Now, back to your betting caddies, Brady Cannon, Matt Humans, and Wes Reynolds.
Rated a top 5 golf course in the state by Golf Digest and a top 100 residential course in the country, South Shore Country Club is the first Jack Nicklaus signature design golf course in Nevada. An inspiration that reaches the tops of ridges before falling away down rugged canyons to the sparkling Lake Las Vegas below, this private club par 71 masterpiece has generous fairways, up to 5 tee boxes per hole, and stunning water features. With its dramatic elevation change, incredible scenery, and immaculate conditions, South Shore Country Club ignites a golfer's passion and provides a peaceful escape. You might also be lucky enough to spot the bighorn sheep that have become frequent spectators on the course's spectacular finishing holes. For more information on the fantastic South Shore Country Club at Lake Las Vegas, visit southshoreccllv.com. That's southshoreccllv.com. Or call 702-804-6461 and tell them VSiN sent you. And with that, we bring in our guest, Ben Coley. He is a columnist, golf writer for The Sporting Life in the UK. He has been here on Long Shots with us before to preview the PGA Championship. When we bring him back for the Open Championship, he is at Royal Portrush. You can follow him on Twitter at Ben Coley Golf. Welcome back to the program, Ben. And first, talk to us about the weather. I know there's been some rain. It continues to show rain in the forecast. It looks like we're going to get some wind as well. What do you expect to happen over the course of the next 4 days?
Yeah, it's been a really miserable afternoon. There are a couple of players caught out in the weather this afternoon. Rory was out there when the rain started coming down, and Matt Wallace was still grinding away, trying to work on his game just in time for tee off tomorrow. I think the forecast is a bit better for Thursday, but it's still not great, and there's a lot of rain in it. I don't really think so much the wind is a major factor compared to St Andrews 4 years ago and various other Opens over the last 10 years. I think the wind is manageable, but it's the rain which is really going to make this a proper grind.
Ben, let's look at this field this week. Rory is the favorite. I think he deserves to be the favorite. Do you think Brooks Koepka, the fact his caddy is from Portrush, is going to give him any sort of advantage this week on that course?
It could do, yeah. Rory was in with the media today and was talking about the local knowledge and how he applies it. And there are quite a lot of really challenging, quite scary approach shots for these guys. Rory alluded to that himself, where you have to be really brave and take on some bunkers that ordinarily you'd shy away from. And I think if Brooks can tap into that with his caddy Ricky Elliott, then that'll be to his advantage. But obviously he'll have to play a little bit better than he has the last couple of starts, but we know he can turn it on at the drop of a hat.
There's been a lot of talk this week about Rory being the favorite and how the pressure might affect him, maybe in a negative way. Do you think that's possible?
It didn't look like it to me today. I thought he found that nice, sweet spot between sort of embracing the pressure and getting tied up in the occasion here. He was trying to talk about the impact this tournament could have as a more lasting thing on the community and on Northern Ireland in general without making it about him. And he said he doesn't feel like the centre of attention. I mean, I think that's probably a little bit wide of the mark. He really is the centre of attention, but I think he can probably channel it in the right way. I think it's a good thing that he gets a nice morning tea time and he doesn't have to wait all day watching and sort of itching to get going. And he's the sort of player who can cope with that sort of thing. So it wouldn't worry me at all, no. And I think really Thursday is crucial for him. He needs to get off to a good start, but if he does that, he could really ride this crowd all the way to Sunday afternoon.
Ben, you were just alluding to Rory McIlroy, and of course we recall the 2011 U.S. Open at Congressional, which received a ton of rain before that tournament. He absolutely destroyed that golf course and made it pretty short, and eventually shot 16 under par. But this looks like a course this week where the rain and all of that Portrush has gotten isn't really going to force you to use a lot of drivers this week. So that brings a lot more ball strikers into play. And going to your column this week that you had in Sporting Life, one of your tips was one of the best ball strikers in the world, and that would be Henrik Stenson at 30-1.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is that, like you say, you can't really attack off the tee here. It doesn't feel like you can. I think Rory will be tempted to at times. When the wind's in the right direction and things like that, and he feels comfortable. But initially, I think you'll see a lot of players playing from the same spots, and obviously that means you're looking more towards guys who rely on their approach play, and Henrik Stenson's right up there with the very best in the world in that respect. So obviously he won't mind the conditions, and if he can be anything like as good as he was 3 years ago, he'll be a massive factor this week, and I think it's just a case of the putter warming up a little bit from last week in Scotland.
Ben Coley is our guest. You can follow him on Twitter at Ben Coley Golf and read his column about the British Open in the Sporting Life on Twitter at The Sporting Life. And Ben, talking about some of the players that you like of the ball striker mold, maybe are there some players that you are fading this week that you don't know if they can handle the wet weather, obviously some wind, that maybe just aren't built to perform here at a British Open and especially this week at Portrush?
Yeah, I mean, one of the really popular guys here, if you speak to people in the media centre, John Rahm's a name everyone is talking about, and I totally get it because, you know, he's won the Irish Open twice. He's the informed golfer in the world really right now. But you look at his Open record, and he's not had a top 40 in 3 starts, and I'm sure he'll figure it out one day. But this is a real challenge. This is so different to what he faced 2 weeks ago at Lahinch, where he could just get after that golf course with his driver. You know, the sun was on his back as well. And although he said in his press conference today that he doesn't mind wind and rain, I don't think it necessarily is what he would favour. So I thought he was one I could probably find a way to oppose in some respects. And the other one really who you'd have to have a question mark about at the moment would be Jordan Spieth. He was brilliant here 2 years ago, but obviously a lot's changed since. And, it papered over the cracks a little bit when he went with those 3 top 10s earlier in the summer, relying on his putter and his short game. And that'll take you so far. But with the wane and the way the rain is set to bed in this week, I just think he's probably vulnerable and he could find some real trouble spots off the tee.
Hey, Ben, how about other players maybe you're looking to follow or players you might fade this week at Portrush?
Yeah, I think the most solid is Patrick Cantlay. I think if you look through his stats, he's gaining strokes in every department. He's a little bit under the radar over here still because, he goes about his business pretty quietly. And, yeah, he's only won a couple of tournaments on the PGA Tour. But obviously we've seen him contending for the Masters and 3rd in the USPGA as well. So I don't see any reason he wouldn't play well. He was 12th last year at Carnoustie. Of the more local options, I really like Shane Lowry. Again, the radar thing I'm talking about, like all eyes are on Rory. We had Rory in the press room today. We had Graham McDowell, but Shane Lowry's not quite had the same attention for obvious reasons, but he is a winner this year. He was impressive in Abu Dhabi. He's got some links form. He was 9th in the Open 5-6 years ago, and he really feels like his game's in a great place right now. And if you look at his approach play stats, they're as good as they've ever been. So I think Shane Lowry, certainly one who wouldn't mind the bad weather. And the other one for me is Tommy Fleetwood. We're always talking about him in majors, obviously, because he's so solid throughout the bag. But this is the week where I kind of feel he slipped off the radar a little bit in a way that he wasn't at Carnoustie, where he owns the course record. record, and the year before at Birkdale, which is his hometown. So there's just a little bit less pressure on him this week, and I think that would suit. And his game's fine. He's not missed a cut in a year now, so there are no issues on that score.
Ben, we've seen at least over the last decade that more so than any other of the other majors that the Open Championship really is the one where experience matters. 8 of the last U.S. or British Opens have been won by players aged 35 or older. Are you someone that's kind of a believer in the experience matters theory here?
Yeah, yes and no. I mean, obviously, among my squad there, we've got a couple of guys in their 20s in Cantlay and Fleetwood, but both of them actually have been through a heck of a lot. Obviously, Cantlay in his personal life and Fleetwood in his career, he kind of has had a second coming over the last couple of years. So I think that adds to their level of maturity. But there's no doubt, as you said, by far the best major, if you're trying to find someone a little bit older to play well, would be the Open Championship. And I actually think Jim Furyk could go quite well. I know he's closing in on his 50th birthday this year, but you look at his approach play stats on the PGA Tour, really, really strong. Second at Sawgrass to Rory McIlroy, of course, and he was 28th in the US Open at Pebble Beach, which was really soft. And although it's going to be soft here, there's a lot more run out. And I think his style of game is much better suited to this nowadays. So Furyk's one who could go well. I know Matt Kuchar will be very popular as well. Obviously, he was runner-up in 2017 behind Jordan Spieth. And one of the more interesting ones who's completely off the radar, Zach Johnson. If you look at guys who are always playing well in the Open, he's looking for his 7th top 20 finish in 8 years, which is just a phenomenal record. And I know he's just slipped outside the world's top 100, but there are reasons to be positive. He played okay at Pebble Beach as well. So he's another where that experience could certainly count for something.
Very interesting on Zach. Ben Coley once again is our guest. And Ben, you talk about Tommy Fleetwood maybe being a little bit under the radar. I think a guy, because he hasn't played exceptionally well, he hasn't won a major yet in his career, once again flying under the radar, probably for the first time coming into a major in a long time, is Ricky Fowler. And he does have a win in the season. He won at Phoenix, took second at the Honda. So no real reason he should be that much further under the radar, but it seems maybe people are giving up on him that he can win a major. Would you fancy Ricky Fowler to have a good shot this week?
Yeah, I think a lot of those things that I've said about Tommy and Cantlay to a lesser extent do apply to Fowler. Like it's probably a good thing that we're not talking about him. But at the same time, his form since Phoenix has been pretty patchy. He's not played particularly well, and he was disappointing in Scotland last week. And the interesting thing there for me was that he was tinkering a lot. The commentators were talking about his grip and how it's changed over the last couple of months, and how he was just getting a little bit stuck on his backswing. So, I mean, I'm no golf expert when it comes to technicals, but when I hear people worrying about those, it certainly would raise a red flag for me. On the other hand, what I would say is that tough conditions, obviously it was fairly miserable when he won at Phoenix in the final round there on a really tough Sunday, and his best Open for me in terms of the way he approached it was 2011 at St George's, where he really dealt with the conditions well there. So there are loads of positives for Fowler, but it just feels like this isn't the week, and maybe we've got to wait another year.
Yeah, I would agree with that as well. All right, so there's so much hype this week around Rory McIlroy, Jon Rahm. I'm not hearing anything about Justin Rose. Is there talk there about Justin Rose? Or are we just not hearing it here? And how do you like his chances this week?
Yeah, he made some headlines yesterday over here with some of his comments on the FedEx Cup. But in terms of his chance in this, I guess the fact we've not seen him since the US Open is always going to sort of remove him slightly from the analysis of things like the Scottish Open and the Irish Open, where we've got some tangible links for him to look at. The other thing for me, his Open record remains a question mark. I know he played brilliantly over the weekend at Carnoustie, but had he not made that putt on the final hole on Friday, he would have missed the cut. And before that, his best Open finish was 98 as an amateur. So, you know, the height he hits the ball, I don't always think that this style of golf is particularly well suited to his game. And I'd sort of cling to that view and think that this might not be for him. But obviously, he's a world-class golfer. And when we're talking about approach play, that when he's on song, he's right up there with Stenson.
Great stuff, Ben. Thank you again for joining us, coming on from Portrush. Enjoy the Open. And who are you rooting for? Who's your pick?
If I could have one, I'd love Tommy Fleetwood to win this. Him or Rory McIlroy. I mean, Rory would be a great story to rival any we've seen in this sport. Well, with Tiger Woods in April, I suppose. So Rory would be the heart, but the head, I think Tommy Fleetwood would go really well this week.
It was Dustin Johnson was Ben's pick for the PGA Championship when we had him on, and that guy took second. So not too shabby, my friend. Again, enjoy the week, and thanks again for joining us on Long Shots.
Thanks, guys. Fun to speak to you.
That's Ben Coley. You can follow him on Twitter at Ben Coley Golf. When we come back, we'll talk with Justin Ray from the 15th Club. Keep it here on VSiN, VSiN.com, and SiriusXM, Channel 204.
decent last week, here's some of what you missed.
I want you to make a number for us.
Sure, go ahead.
He said once Saturday comes and he's running his own book, he doesn't need to bet anymore on sports because he'll have action on every game. What's the yes/no on that?
Oh, what? No, $8. $8.
But by what? By noon? Or what are you talking
I was
about?
going to say, like, you need to set a time and a date. The first time he's actually going to make a bet.
Yeah.
It'll be by Sunday morning, probably, will it not?
Well, yeah, we'll always be making a few plays here.
Okay.
But I'm going to stay out of Matthew Metcalf's way and the team over here. I definitely am going to watch this Tottenham game with a little more, I guess, scrutiny than I usually do. So that'll be a lot of fun.
And you'll take, what, 20,000, I believe you said, on that match coming up on Saturday?
Correct.
We get this every time that you're on, Mike, and now Derek today as well. What are the limits going to be overall on Saturday?
So for Major League Baseball, it'll be 5,000. 10,000 on Game 3, Blues, Bruins, and 20 on the soccer. Baseball totals, I think, will be 2,000. But remember, there's still juice on totals. The no juice only applies to sides. I think we're at 2,000 on totals and 5,000 on the game.
Here it is, everybody. Money line parlays going with some of these favorites. And I'm talking about big ones. And if you know sort of who to avoid, who the casual bettor believes ought to be a big favorite, but you kind of know from following the sport, probably should leave out, you will do very well in a sport like tennis. And I'm sorry if you don't love it as much as football or basketball. Listen, no one loves football and basketball as much as I do. But we're trying to win money. So I'm just sort of suggesting, think about sports like that. That's the message I'm trying to get across.
To me, a decent expected fielding independent is right around like 4.1, 4.10, something like that. And what I really like to do is, if you look for the huge discrepancy, like you see the Zach Davies, to have like a 2.5 run difference between ERA and expected fielding independent, XFIP essentially takes all of the other noise out of it and gives you a more basic measure of how a pitcher is pitching. Mm-hmm. So it gives you more of what you'll expect in terms of maybe runs that he will give up. And so when I look at it, I think 4.1 to like 4.3 is my personal barometer of, okay, maybe that's a guy that you could possibly back here. But if I have a dude who's pitching at a 2.43 ERA, but you got a 4.83 xFIP, and you look and he's usually respected in the market because you have to tie all that in, that's when I usually use these guys for like sell high.
What are the chances you can put up a prop bet, yes or no, that Kevin Durant has played his last game in a Warriors uniform?
Well, I never like to put up any bets on somebody's decision, because we could sit there and analyze a game.
Okay.
You could have an opinion, I could have an opinion, but it's based on, whatever criteria we base it on. I always hate to think, what's this guy thinking? I have no idea what he's thinking. I don't know. I think there's a good possibility of both.
Welcome back to Long Shots, VSiN's weekly golf betting show. Now, back to your betting caddies, Brady Cannon, Matt Humans, and Wes Reynolds.
A course that rates the highest in each factor is Bali High Golf Club, a tropical golf course paradise located on the Las Vegas Strip and in the shadows of some of the most famous hotels in the world. At Bali High, designed by award-winning architects Brian Schmidt and Lee Curley, you will find hundreds of mature palm trees, lagoon-like water features, beautiful bunkering, and a stunning clubhouse home to Sealy Restaurant and an indoor-outdoor patio experience and event space. The course offers Bluetooth technology, caddies upon request, Jello shots, model-like beverage cart staff, VIP service from curb to course and back again, high-quality food and beverage, and a par 3 challenge where you can double your money with one swing. The stunning Bali High Golf Club, located in the heart of the Las Vegas Strip, is a golf jackpot, and there are many reasons why. Play today. To learn more about the Bali High experience or reserve your tee time, call 702-450-8000 or visit BaliHighGolfClub.com. That's BALIHAI golfclub.com. Back to Long Shots. It is Brady Cannon, Matt Humans, and Wes Reynolds, and we want to bring in our guest as we kick off our major implications segment. It is the British Open, the 148th playing from Royal Portrush in Northern Ireland. And to join us on the program and give us some further insight is Justin Ray. He is the head of content at the 15th Club, and you can follow him on Twitter at Justin Ray Golf. He is a second-time guest here of Long Shots, and we like to bring him in for the big tournaments because he is one of the best. Follow him on Twitter. A great follow as well. And it was a tweet I saw you send out earlier today, Justin, where you mentioned for about the last 10 years, the top guys as far as hitting greens in regulation at the Open Championship. We've got weather, you've got heather, you've got rough, you've got undulated greens. Do you feel greens in regulation, as it typically is, will maybe be the most important stat this week as far as hoisting that claret jug?
Well, thanks for having me, first of all. I really appreciate being asked back. It's going to be – it's something week to week. It's a simple metric. It's something that's, is commonplace. It's basically golf's equivalent of batting average at this point. But it's going to tell you who's given themselves the most opportunities to make birdies, to put themselves in position to make the scores they need to make to contend in this championship. And, on that list of guys who have been the most consistent in terms of hitting greens in regulation at the Open, Henrik Stenson's on top of the list. You've got Adam Scott there right at the top. Mark Leishman's another guy who's probably good value this week, has played well in major championships, lost a playoff at the Open in 2015. Great ball striker. Jordan Spieth has a great history in terms of greens and regulation in the Open of the last few years. I know people are going to be hesitant to put some coins on him because of what, we've seen him in the ball striking categories this season, but he's been a consistent performer in links golf throughout his career. Tiger's up there too. So yeah, I think it is a pretty significant statistic and can be pretty telling. And it just gives you an example of, who were consistent ball strikers in links golf at the Open Championship. Our data at 15 Club tells us that, links golf is less of a putting contest than normal. Obviously when it comes to links, distance is less of an advantage. The courses have more run out. Lower ball flight can be important, but when you boil down to it, sometimes it can be some of the more simple metrics that can be telling, and greens and regulation can be that, especially at the Open Championship.
Justin, I'm going to play the name game with you here. Three Matts. Tell me which one you like better this week: Matt Kuchar, Matt Fitzpatrick, or Matt Wallace?
So the guy I'm going to avoid is Matt Fitzpatrick. According to our information, Fitz has actually really struggled in links golf throughout his career on the European Tour. We don't know a ton about Royal Portrush, obviously. They haven't had an Open there in nearly 70 years. The only tournament of note there was 7 years ago at the Irish Open, and it was a one-off, and they've changed the course since then. So you can't take a lot of data from that. But what we've done going into the Open is take a lot of the data on the European Tour in terms of strokes gained on link-style courses that are very similar to what they're playing at Royal Portrush. And Matt Fitzpatrick really doesn't add up in that kind of equation. He's a guy who's, he's contended in PGA Tour events. He's won some big European Tour events, but he hasn't necessarily succeeded on link-style courses. Matt Wallace is a really intriguing player, and he's shown some signs of contending like he did at the PGA Championship. He hasn't done a lot in majors yet at this point in his career, but he's a guy who's been a prolific winner. He's a great story. He's kind of just ridden this just astronomical ride to the top of the sport, where 3-4 years ago, he was winning tournaments on the Alps Tour. So that's the kind of path Matt Wallace has taken over the last few years to kind of grow into it. Matt Kuchar has been one of the most consistent players in the Open Championship over the last several years. He's in the top 5 and scored a par over the last 5 years at the Open. He's a really good links player. He's got a kind of a low, flat ball flight, that kind of flat swing that is really Kuchar's trademark and has been throughout his career. Could be a big benefit at the Open Championship. We know he finished runner-up to Jordan Spieth a couple of years ago. And, the truth of the matter is experience pays at the Open Championship. Since 2011, the average age of winners at the Open is 36 years old. That's 5 years older than anybody else or any of the other 3 majors during that span. So, experience pays off. The numbers dole it out. If you're going between the 3 Matts, I'm going to lean towards Kuchar.
Okay, one more name question for you. And since your name's Justin, how about 2 guys in the same odds range? We're going to go with Justin Rose or Justin Thomas. Would you follow or fade either of those Justins this week?
The comments Justin Rose made earlier in the week about the schedule not really getting him a great opportunity to prepare the way he would like, that's a little bit worrisome for me. Maybe I'm reading into it a little bit too much, and you can do that. Someone gives an honest answer, and sometimes, you get a different impression of you might otherwise have. Rose's metrics across the board are just a little bit down than the kind of astronomically successful play he showed over the last 18 months to 2 years. Justin Thomas is a guy I think he's a little bit under the radar because he's been fighting that wrist injury. He's had some really good opening rounds at the Open Championship and has struggled in rounds 2 through 4. I remember I think he opened with like 66 a couple years ago and then came out and just made an absolute crooked number to start his day 2. That's kind of been his story in links golf. I don't know if I'm real high on either one of those guys this week, but if I have to pick between the two, I think I might lean with Justin Rose simply because of how well he played at the Open last year and his kind of success on links courses throughout his career.
Justin Ray is our guest, head of content at the 15th Club, at Justin Ray Golf on Twitter. And on that Twitter account, you can find a lot of different trends and angles that Justin has put out that I've kind of used a little bit in my personal handicap. And I want to ask you about 2 of them. First of all, Justin, 8 of the last 11 Open Championship winners have been 35 or older. Which one... name me a couple of the elder statesmen, if you will, in this field that you think would qualify and give it a real go this week at Portrush.
I think that conversation begins with Henrik Stenson. I know He's a guy who won the Open 3 years ago. He's coming off 3 consecutive top 10 finishes, just had a top 5 in the Scottish Open. Over the last 10 years, Henrik Stenson is the second best links player in terms of strokes gained per round in the data we've collected in European Tour events. He's only just an inch behind the other guy who I like a lot, Adam Scott. Now, Adam Scott he should have won the Open in 2012. He blew it coming down the stretch when Ernie Els won. Truth of the matter is he's been very consistent in links golf throughout his career, and he's really shown up in the majors the last 2-3 years. You remember he kind of came out of nowhere to contend at the PGA Championship at Bellerive last year. He's put together some really good scores in major championships. I don't think he's played since the U.S. Open, which is a little bit of a reason for concern for me. But if you're going to that veteran route, guys who are experienced, Kuchar, like I mentioned before, is another guy who is having as good a year as anybody. He was really hot at the beginning of the year. And, the narrative about him was all the stuff, the ancillary stuff around the tipping the caddy and the thing at the match play. But the truth is he's got some of the best statistics he's carried throughout his career this season, and he's a great links player as well. So if you're kind of going that veteran route, I really like Stenson a lot this week. He's a guy that I absolutely have bets on this week, whether it's a top 10 or a top 5. And I definitely would stick with, I like Adam Scott a lot. And like I said, I like Matt Kuchar, a guy who, like I said, with links golf, distance doesn't necessarily have as big of an advantage, especially if we get weather, which it was nasty today at Royal Portrush. We could see a little bit of that tomorrow in round 1. Kuchar doesn't hit the ball as far, and it doesn't really penalize him. He's able to, hit mid-iron, short irons into greens where, he has a little bit of a disadvantage week to week on the PGA Tour. So long answer to your question. Sorry, a little long-winded there, but give me Stenson, Adam Scott, and Matt Kuchar in that kind of veteran group.
Justin, I have all 3 of those guys on my card myself. But one more trend I wanted to ask you about. With the Koepka dominance, it's easy to kind of ignore the fact that 11 of the last 16 major winners were first-timers. Any first-timers that you like this week? I know experience really matters at this major, but any of the young first-timers you like?
Yeah, this guy, with all the excitement we had in the final round last year at the Open, with Tiger leading for a period, Rory and Rose going low, and then Molinari ultimately brilliantly winning the championship. It's easy to forget that Xander Schauffele was tied for the 54-hole lead at the Open last year. This is a guy who's only played 10 major championships. He's finished 6th or better in 5 of them. And the only guy with more top 6 finishes in majors in that span is Brooks Koepka. He's kind of like a mini Koepka in that he dialed it up for big championships. Week to week on the PGA Tour, he's not necessarily as consistently successful yet in his young career as you may think a player of his caliber could be. But I'm telling you, in major championships, the guy is always there. He's always firing rounds in the 60s. He clearly can play in a links-type setup as he showed at Carnoustie last year. He's one of those guys who I could see definitely breaking through, who hasn't won yet. And the other guy who just won the Irish Open a couple of weeks ago, I know that, he's had some flare-ups temper-wise in some big tournaments. He's still young. But Jon Rahm is an excellent player on these types of golf courses. At the Irish Open the last 3 years, I think he's 17 strokes better than anybody else in that span. He's won 2 of the last 3, finished 4th in the other one. His last 3 starts worldwide, he finished 3rd, 2nd, and 1st. I really like Jon Rahm a lot this week. If he's able to keep the ball straight, stay out of those pot bunkers, our data suggests that it's going to be a little bit more penalizing than normal for players to miss the fairway. He's a guy, if he can take advantage of his driver and he can make a ton of birdies. The 2 guys who I think could break through with their first major win will be Xander and Jon Rahm.
Justin, we sound like pretty sharp bettors here. We're talking about everybody but the favorite. And before we let you go, I do want to focus on that favorite, which is Rory McIlroy in his home stomping grounds there in Northern Ireland, not far from Royal Portrush, where he grew up. Of course, he has the course record. He's come out and said that this would mean more to him than making the career Grand Slam by adding the green jacket at the Masters. And the question all week long has been, is the pressure in the spotlight too much? What do you think?
It's a great question. It's the ultimate, most interesting storyline to me the first 2 days of the championship. Men with much closer ties to Northern Ireland than me have called this the biggest sporting event in the history of the country.
My history maybe is.
Did I lose you guys?
No, we're here.
We're here.
Okay, sorry. Thought I lost you. If you were just to say this guy is player A, we don't have the name for McIlroy, the context, where he's from, the size of the event. If we don't have that going for us, you would say, okay, he's got the best score to par the last 5 years in the Open Championship. He's the only guy to finish in the top 10 for the last 5 years in the Open. And by the way, he missed one of those Open Championships due to injury. He's got the second most birdies or eagles at the Open the last 5-6 years. You just look at it and you're like, oh, wow, he's already won twice this year. He's a top player in the world. You're thinking, of course, this is somebody we should absolutely have in the top of the list. It's just with the size, the magnitude of scrutiny, what this means for the country, all of the unlikelihood that there would even ever be an Open Championship here based on, all the stuff that has nothing to do with golf in that country. It's a huge moment. And this is a guy who has seized good moments in his career, especially on European soil. You think of all those huge moments in the Ryder Cup, what he did at the Open Championship 5 years ago. It would be an amazing story if he broke through and won. I don't know if the pressure is going to get to him too much, but man, it would be an incredible thing to watch. He's as talented as anybody, obviously. If he's knocking putts down, he's going to be tough to beat.
All right, Justin, thank you so much for joining us again on Long Shots. Enjoy the Open. One more question for you. Who's your pick? One guy. Give us your long shot.
I want to go somewhere else, and he's the opposite of a long shot. But there's a reason why this guy is 35 shots better in majors than anyone else since 2017. I think Brooks Koepka wins, and he caps off one of the best major championship seasons in history this week at Royal Portrush.
All right, there you have it. Brooks Koepka is the choice for Justin Ray. Follow him on Twitter at Justin Ray Golf. Good stuff once again, my friend, and we'll talk to you down the road.
All right, fellas. Thanks for having me.
All right, that is Justin Ray, a great guest and a double guest here on Long Shots. We'll come back and we'll give out our plays, Brady, Matt, and Wes, our plays for the British Open at Royal Portrush. Keep it here on VSiN, VSiN.com, and SiriusXM Channel 204.
VSiN last week. Here's some of what you missed.
I want you to make a number for us.
Sure, go ahead.
He said once Saturday comes and he's running his own book, he doesn't need to bet anymore on sports because he'll have action on every game. What's the yes/no on that?
Oh, what? No, $8. $8.
But by what? By noon? Or what are you talking
I was going
about?
to say, like, you need to set a time and a date. The first time he's actually going to make a bet.
Yeah.
It'll be by Sunday morning, probably, will it not?
Well, yeah, we'll always be making a few plays here.
Okay.
But I'm going to stay out of Matthew Metcalf's way and the team over here. I definitely am going to watch this Tottenham game with a little more, I guess, scrutiny than I usually do. So that'll be a lot of fun.
And you'll take, what, 20,000, I believe you said, on that match coming up on Saturday?
Correct.
We get this every time that you're on, Mike, and now Derek today as well. What are the limits going to be overall on Saturday?
So for Major League Baseball, it'll be 5,000. 10,000 on Game 3, Blues, Bruins, and 20 on the soccer. Baseball totals, I think, will be 2,000. But remember, there's still juice on totals. The no juice only applies to sides. I think we're 2,000 on totals and 5,000 on the game.
Think that, and I do think that's a lesson for handicapping any sport, right? You should always be aware of your results. We spend most of our time talking about here's who we think are going to win, here's what we're betting, and that's great, but it's just as valuable, if not perhaps more so, to then go back, as you've done, and say, hey, you know what? This stuff that I was doing before, not really working out as well, but had I done X, Y, or Z, and in your case, top tens, I'd be making bank. And so I love that.
So he starts running out. He's got the ticket. He's running up to Chris, look at this. $1,000. $1,000. And he's running around, and he gets like a rolled up newspaper. He's got the ticket in one hand, and he's whipping himself in the butt like a jockey on a horse, running around the room. And we had a big room at Cal Needle. He's running around the room. Tell Yolanda that. Tell Yolanda that. Tell Yolanda that. And I mean, we're dying laughing.
Welcome back to Long Shots, VSiN's weekly golf betting show. Now, back to your betting caddies, Brady Cannon, Matt Humans, and Wes Reynolds.
All right, gentlemen, the Open Championship starts in about 4.5 hours. So let's get to the plays. Brady, Matt, and Wes with our plays for the Open Championship at Royal Portrush. We'll start with you, Wes, and I know you have a pretty big card.
Yeah, and some of these are in pocket prices and not current prices. John Rahm at 25 to 1 I took. Now he's probably at about 15, 16 to 1. I still think he's probably worth a look here. He looks primed to potentially win his first major. I like his form. Schauffele, who we've all mentioned, I think we all might have him this week at 25 to 1. The two veterans, the two S's, Scott and Stenson at around 30 to 1. Guys, I really think the ball striking, they're both top 10. Actually, Stenson's number 1 in strokes gained approach. Justin Thomas have 40 to 1 in pocket. He's at about in the 30s now. A couple guys in the 40s, Matsuyama and Matt Kuchar, who Justin Ray, of course, mentioned. Rafa Cabrera-Bello, who I know Brady, you tipped a couple weeks ago and got a really good number on. Cabrera-Bello, of course, was second here at the Irish Open. Really the last big major tournament played here in 2012. And then a couple bombs I put. Patrick Reed, 90 to 1. I think his game's coming into form. That price just looked a little big. I know Matt doesn't like that, but I think he could be a little bit of a surprise. And then I took one bomb, Lucas Glover, at 150 to 1.
All those picks look pretty good except for Fat Pat.
I do think he's coming into form, though. I like the way he played in Detroit.
God, I hope you're wrong about that. All right, let's go to John Rahm, who I've actually got a 20 to 1, but now he's down to 16 to 1. Xander Schauffele at 20. Adam Scott, I think I bet him at 30. Henrik Stenson right now available at about 40.
Wow. That's a hell of a number.
Stenson within the past 24 hours. Like I said, check South Point, Westgate, Circus Sports. You got to shop around. You can find some pretty good numbers on some of these players. Matt Kuchar up around 40 to 1. But I think I listed Westgate odds as of earlier today on this graphic. So that's what I got. Rahm, Schauffele, Scott, Stenson, Kuchar. I hope you guys do well because it looks like we have a lot of the same players.
Absolutely. And, I think it's a sign of golf betting becoming so popular. It's really a volatile market out there between shopping at South Point and Circus Sports and the Westgate. I haven't even looked at MGM or some of the other books around town, but a lot of different numbers and shopping opportunities, which is not only great for bettors, but great for the game of golf and betting on golf. I'm with you guys on Schauffele. Just too good in these majors, as Justin Ray talked about. John Rahm, I'd be a little surprised if he won, but 25 is a great number, and I think he's going to be in the mix. Tommy Fleetwood, I really like. Got him at 35-1 at Circus Sports, along with Adam Scott at 35-1. Kuchar, I was able to grab 40. Rafa Cabrera Bello, as you mentioned, Wes, got him here at the South Point a few weeks ago at 110-1. Been playing really well on the Rolex series. A lot of these links courses the last few weeks over in Europe. And then Haotong Li, my big long shot bomb. You've got Lucas Glover at 150. I've got Haotong Li at 130-1, and you can actually find a better number than that, I believe, in a lot of places. We'll go to the matchups here real quick. I took Matt Wallace at plus 120 over Bryson DeChambeau, Stenson over Fowler at minus 120, and Kuchar over Day at minus 120. Wes?
I like those matchups.
Yeah, I'm picking on a couple guys. I did pick on Molinari a little bit. I just don't think he's in great form. And actually, the guys against him, Stenson, Fleetwood, and Scott, are all guys that I think are going to go well this week. Sink over Park. Stuart Sink's been watching that Tom Watson at Turnberry thing for the last month on the Golf Channel, where Sink actually did win the Claret Jug. So maybe he's got a little motivation in him this week. That's just where I lean.
Sink on his shoulder. I mean, a chip on his shoulder.
Yeah, and then Xander Lombard plus 130 over Kurt Kitayama. Lombard actually was the runner-up at the last big tournament played here, which was the 2014 Amateur Championship. So maybe a gut feeling there on him.
I like that Wes is betting against Phil Mickelson there. Noren over Mickelson. That was a matchup I considered as well. I have Stenson over Fowler, Kuchar over Day, Koepka over Tiger, Rahm over Tiger, Rahm over Rose, Cantlay over Spieth, which is a little higher price than I want to use here, but I really like that matchup. And then Eddie Pepperell at even money over Tony Finau.
Well, that'll do it for the British Open version of Long Shots. About 4.5 hours until they tee it off at Royal Portrush. Enjoy the action. Matt Youmans, you'll be back here early in the morning while the action is going on for Follow the Money. I know that. Guys, it's our last major of the year, but guess what? We'll be back next week for a World Golf Championship as they do the WGC FedEx St. Jude in Memphis at the TPC Southwind, and we'll be back for all of that, and hopefully we can cash some tickets, and hopefully our pockets are lined with some futures that we cash here on the British Open. Good night, everybody. Enjoy the Open. It's VSiN, VSiN.com, and SiriusXM Channel 204.
Last week, here's some of what you missed.
I want you to make a number for us.
Sure, go ahead.
He said once Saturday comes and he's running his own book, he doesn't need to bet anymore on sports because he'll have action on every game. What's the yes/no on that?
Oh, what? No, $8. $8.
But by what? By noon? Or what are you talking about?
I'm going to say, like, you need to set a time and a date. The first time he's actually going to make a bet.
Yeah.
It'll be by Sunday morning, probably, will it not?
Well, yeah, we'll always be making a few plays here.
Okay.
But I'm going to stay out of Matthew Metcalf's way and the team over here. I definitely am going to watch this Tottenham game with a little more, I guess, scrutiny than I usually do. So that'll be a lot of fun.
And you'll take, what, 20,000, I believe you said, on that match coming up on Saturday?
Correct.
We get this every time that you're on, Mike, and now Derek today as well. What are the limits going to be overall on Saturday?
So for Major League Baseball, it'll be 5,000. 10,000 on Game 3, Blues, Bruins, and 20 on the soccer. Baseball totals, I think, will be 2,000. But remember, there's still juice on totals. The no juice only applies to sides. I think we're at 2,000 on totals and 5,000 on the game.
Here it is, everybody. Moneyline parlays going with some of these favorites. And I'm talking about big ones. And if you